Massive crypto legislation is being voted on today in the Senate, and this is the biggest crypto bill we've ever seen, and this is going to be huge for stablecoins. Now, Eric Trump just described why a stablecoin bill is important, and then I'm going to have 3 DeFi projects that I think are set to benefit the most from this crypto legislation.
The reality is every single person in the world outside of America wants to own the US dollar. We should be very, very proud of that as a country.
So clearly the US, they want net buyers of US treasuries, and the stablecoin bill will actually make it happen. Stablecoin bill about to pass Senate and what this means for crypto. So the crypto industry appears poised to grab its first major legislative victory as Congress moves closer to passing a bill to regulate stablecoins. It's called the Genius Act. Just like you, Disco fam, the bill would require stablecoins, whose value is typically pegged to the dollar, this is the important part, to hold reserves of liquid safe assets, aka treasury bills. And the reason we need people like stablecoin providers to buy US treasuries is because no one else wants to buy them. In fact, the money machines are about to be turned on. And this is breaking news. The Fed caught quietly bailing out the bond market with a $43 billion injection. So the Fed, aka the US government, just did a bond auction and there were no buyers. But they said no problem. The Fed snapped up billions in treasuries last week. They did $8 billion in one day and $43 billion in total. Now, very smart guy, Josh Mandel, he worked at Salomon Brothers for about a decade. He is saying this is a ticking time bomb. Take this from a former market maker in 30-year treasury bonds at Salomon. This is a ticking time bomb swept under the rug. We used to talk about the disaster that ensue if there was ever a missed auction in 30-year bonds, aka not enough buyers stepped up. A missed auction meant there were not enough bids to cover the offering. Think about that. Were it not for the Fed, aka the US government, we'd be experiencing a failure to roll over bonds right now, which would then lead to default, a debt crisis, a monetary collapse. Monetary policy, in this case low-key quantitative easing in disguise, is just the janitor cleaning up the mess made by Congress. The big print is coming. Read about it before it happens if you want to get ahead of the curve. And I got 3 altcoins so we can get ahead of the curve. And in fact, I bought some this morning. So to look for quality altcoins, we're looking at the DeFi category on CoinGecko, and you can see this on CoinMarketCap as well. You just type in DeFi, go down to categories, and you'll see it right around there. Now, the first DeFi project we're going to look at is one of the strongest DeFi projects out there, and that's going to be Chainlink. Chainlink is down about 4% on this red day, but if you scroll, there's a lot of altcoins that are falling a much more than the 4% there. Now, Chainlink is still a ways away from its all-time high. It cracked $50 in 2021, and if you look at the charts right here, now Chainlink is still a ways away from its previous all-time high. It was trading above $50. But if you look at the 6-month candle, yeah, that's right. Every candle represents 6 months. We have a really good target for Chainlink here. Now, this is, a logarithmic chart here. So, take this with, maybe add a little bit of bearishness to it. But the way you would measure a rising wedge breakout is you would do the maximum length from when it has touched the top and touched the bottom. It's going to be this range right here. And then you would just put it to the breakout, and that would give you a nice Chainlink target of a $200 Chainlink. So obviously I'm very bullish on Chainlink. Now let's go to short-term price action. It's not going to teleport to 200. So now we've switched from a 6-month chart to a weekly chart. So each of these candles represents 1 week. And I noticed something on the Fibonacci extension. So we go from the swing high to the swing low. Well, it's making some pretty impressive moves. Listening to the Fib extension, you can see it tested the bottom of the range, shot up to the 236, came back down, tested the bottom of the range, hit the 382, and then hit the 0.5. And then we came back down and tested the bottom of the range. And so I think logically we could expect a move to the 618, and the 618 is coming in right around $36. So $36 is going to be, I think, a pretty good place to take some short-term profits on Chainlink. Now let's do DeFi token number 2, and number 3 is going to be the smallest and maybe the one I'm most bullish on. In fact, that's the one I bought this morning. Now, Aave also a ways away from its previous all-time high, trading above $600 last cycle, and, couldn't quite get 400 with all the bullishness after Trump started buying it, and, Trump won the election here. So let's look at Aave, and so we're going to look at DeFi Llama. Now, we're looking at 2 different lines. The purple line is TVL, and the blue line is the price. So you can see TVL, total value locked, Aave is at an all-time record high. So they've never secured more money in their protocol. But when you add to the token price to this chart, you can see the price has not yet caught up. Normally, they kind of move, a little bit of lockstep. But right now, we're still lagging on the Aave price, so I expect the Aave price to catch up soon. Now we're going to look at two Aave charts. First one is a 4-hour small time frame head and shoulders. And then we're going to go to the daily and look at a larger head and shoulders. Now the small time head and shoulders literally played out perfectly here. So you can see the left shoulder, you can see the head, and you can see the right shoulder as well there. So that's a pretty textbook head and shoulders. And the way you would expect this to move, you measure from the neckline to the top of the head, and it gives you your breakout. And look how perfectly that coincided with the top of Aave, local price there. So let's zoom out, go to the daily, and there's another head and shoulders pattern that I wanted to point out. Now I actually moved on the 12-hour. It looks a little bit cleaner. So the left shoulder, I got it starting here, tail end of February. And you can see we had a pretty jagged left shoulder there, pretty askew head. Now I actually moved it to the 12-hour. It looks a little cleaner here. So you can see the left shoulder right there. You can see we have now finished the head, and, probably I think we dip a little bit lower for this right shoulder. Maybe a perfect world that was the little bit of the bottom there. Well, let's go ahead and measure that. Now, again, don't be surprised if this right shoulder looks a little bit more like this, but I think the target is essentially going to be the same here for the breakout. And depending on when this happens, you're looking at a nice target of around $360 Aave. Now, like the $360 target, you can see, when you kind of measure the tops of Aave, get a little bit of a coinciding of events here. So maybe that's a pretty good target for Aave. Now, third token, it's the smallest token so far, and that's going to be Moonwell. Now, Moonwell has the best unit price. There's unit bias in crypto. People don't like to buy expensive tokens, even if it has a smaller market cap. So I think coming in under a nickel is going to, make retail want to buy this token. So Moonwell, when you see, we're kind of stuck in a little bit of a megaphone pattern. Now, I'll give you my price target in a second, but first I wanted to go to DeFi Llama to see the strength of the protocol. We're seeing something similar to what we saw with Aave. You can see the TVL all-time high. Has never been this high, but if you look at the token price, hasn't quite caught up. So I expect another pump for Moonwell to maybe start, mimicking what we saw with the previous spikes. Now, megaphone pattern, very, very bullish, obviously, here. The target would be, just kind of bouncing around like a megaphone. And I'm not saying we're going to go, straight up, might come back down, test the bottom again. But looking at the top of the megaphone, you're looking at a very, very good pump from this level. It's about a 400% pump, say if it were to happen in October. So looking at the price here, I like a 13, 14, 15 cent Moonwell. It'd probably be a pretty good place to take some profits. So those are my 3 DeFi tokens. Let me know what your favorite DeFi project is. Maybe we'll cover it in the next video. I'm DZ. I'll see you in your DeFi bags at the top.